Hello, everybody. Welcome back to 180 Perspective. Now, if you remember, we're starting a series on Revelation, and I talked about what the word apocalypse means last time. It does not mean the end of the world. It actually means an unveiling. And so I wanted to begin this series on Revelation and start talking about what Jesus had to say to his disciples. Now, there's a lot that we could cover, and I'm just going to give you a brief little talk today about what Jesus said to his disciples. And we're going to go mostly through Matthew 24, but today we're going to also bounce over to Luke and read Luke's account of what happened. So in Matthew 24, verses 1 through 2, and so let's just go ahead and read that. It says, Jesus came out of the temple, as he was going away, when his disciples came up to point out the temple buildings to him. So the disciples started pointing out the temple building. And he says, do you not see these things? I tell you the truth, not one stone will be left upon another. They're all going to be torn down. Anyway, so if you jump over, and I wanted to jump over to Luke's account because there's a little bit more that is unveiled to us here. In Luke's account, Luke chapter 21, verses 1 through 6, there was something else that was taking place just prior to all of this happening where Jesus was talking to his disciples. So Luke 21, verses 1 through 6, and it says this, and he, which is Jesus, looked up and he saw the rich putting their gifts into the treasury. And he saw the poor widow putting in 2 small copper coins. And he said, truly I say to you, this poor widow put in more than all of them, for they all out of their surplus put into the offering, but she out of her poverty put in all that she had to live on. And then, while some were talking about the temple, which was the disciples, that it was adorned with beautiful stones and votive gifts, he said, as for these things which you're looking at, the days will come in which they will not be one stone left upon another, which will not be torn down. Now, what's interesting, a couple things that I noticed here. Jesus looked up and he saw that rich people were making offerings. They were coming and they were giving gifts into the treasury of the temple. And so they were giving like gifts. But this poor widow comes in and she has only 2 small coins. And it was all that she had to live on. And she put those 2 small coins into the treasury. And I thought that was amazing. And Jesus was pointing this out and saying this to the disciples. He said, look, this poor lady here has put in more than all of them. And that means more than all of them put together she put in. And so then all of a sudden, the disciples, though, instead of paying attention and looking at the woman and listening to what Jesus was saying about her, they started pointing out the building and how beautiful the stones are and the votive gifts. Now, it's interesting because the Greek word for votive gifts is actually consecrated offerings, which means offerings that were set apart. Now, these offerings were offerings that were made. They were gifts that were made by probably the wealthy people to the temple. And then they looked at it and go, wow, this is really beautiful. Let's just hang it up over here. And let's put this one over there. And so they were like, the disciples were all amazed. Isn't that funny? Because Jesus is talking about a poor widow who gave nothing, or everything she gave was huge. She gave out of her poverty. All the other people were giving out of their wealth. And the disciples, instead of listening to what Jesus was saying, were looking at the beautiful buildings and the beautiful gifts hanging on the walls. And so Jesus said to them, unveiling. Now the word that was used in Matthew says Jesus answered. But the actual Greek word is pakrino, which means that he actually unveiled in answer to them. Now, that's interesting because they weren't asking questions. They were actually disturbed, or actually not disturbed, but Jesus was disturbed by their pointing out of things. And their focus was off of where that should have been. And so Jesus says to them, in response to the way they're acting, and that's really what was implied there. In response to the way they're acting, he went to correct them in their way of thinking by telling them that not one thing is going to be left upon another, one stone. It's all going to be torn down. That was a prophecy. That was an apocalypse, an unveiling. That was Jesus saying to his disciples, hey, you're focused on the wrong thing. Because as we enter into the study of Revelations, we need to be focused on the right thing. And that's the whole point of this, what Jesus was saying here. You need to be focused on the right things. Because if you're not and you're focused on all the beautiful things around, and in contrast to the poor widow who was given everything she had, because she knew that her relationship with God was more important than the 2 coins that she had. And she trusted that God was going to take care of her. You understand that? She trusted that God was going to take care of her. So that's why she could give everything that she had. But Jesus was trying to get the disciples to understand this, but instead they had their focus on other things. And because of their focus on other things, they missed Jesus' message. They missed it. And so when Jesus was telling them that everything's going to be destroyed, in effect, what he was saying is something greater than the temple is here. We no longer need the temple because now you are going to become the temple. But they didn't get that yet. They got it later, but they didn't get it yet because their focus was off. And so then we're going to talk more about this next week when we come back together. But I wanted you to get the point that as we enter into Revelation and the study of Revelation, where are you focused? Where are you looking at? If you're looking at the things of this world, you're going to be robbed of what God is trying to reveal to you. And the joy will be stripped out of you. As you start looking at the Revelations, you're going to be looking at it from a perspective of the end, rather than as you enter into Revelations, the study of it, Revelation, it's actually a study of the unveiling and the beginning of Jesus being revealed in his glory and what that means for us who put our faith in him. So it's amazing if we start looking at Revelation as not the end, but at the beginning. It's going to change our perspective on how we see it and what God reveals to us through it. Anyway, I hope this is instructive to you and helps you out. Blessings to you, and we'll see you again next week.